So all of a sudden it's the Lil Jon. Yeah.
That's right. I'm talking like toilet flushes, jingle bells and shit.
Get this man a soundboard.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we're rolling.
Yeah.
Welcome, kind viewer. Thank you for joining us on the Jam Room Podcast, the JRP, as we call it. There's not another JR podcast that you should be aware of.
No.
We got Evan Simmons here. Shout out Evan. He's a phenomenal drummer, session player, pianist, guitarist, just all-around musician.
Kind of
We appreciate him for being here. My name is Sam. This is Illia. Welcome. Evan, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Same.
Man, well, thanks for joining us. Get this thing kicked off. So what got you started on drums, percussion, music? What was that story like for you?
So my older brother played drums. Mom said we all had to learn an instrument. And so when, I had to bite the bullet and take lessons, I wasn't going to let him win. And that was it. That was like, age 9 and have been playing since.
Nice.
That's very cool.
Very cool.
Good motivator.
Yeah. Spite works wonders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who were like your big drum inspirations when you're coming up?
It changes as time goes on, as a kid. Like nobody good. There was a lot of like bad like Christian rock in the house. So like I don't know, there was a dude named Jason Sherlock that played for a death metal band from Australia.
Nice.
Yeah, but that didn't affect my play. I was still working on like eighth note beats. So that up until like college, when I, kind of was forced to dig into jazz in a meaningful way. And then the bop guys, Art Blakey and Max Roach, Elvin Jones,
Okay.
were wizards. And then, once I found out that there was rock and roll that wasn't Christian, then I don't know, man, there's a ton of guys. Greg Saulnier from Deerhoof is probably like my big one.
Okay.
Just unreal, maintaining groove while getting more surreal as the song goes on is something I would like to learn how to do.
That's awesome. That's super cool.
Yeah.
So what was the moment that you realized you wanted to do music like professionally, or at least pursue it like academically? Like what was the big driver there?
So, again, kind of tied in with some of the Christian rock stuff that, up until kind of my early 20s, right? The only idea regarding like professional development was like you would feel a calling, and drums was the thing I liked doing the most. So it was like, oh, this is it. This is like the meaning of my life. This is, the thing. By the time I had kind of gotten out of grad school, it was like, oh, this is a set of job skills that I know how to do. And then I think like a lot of musicians, the gigs that opened up ended up opening doors. And from there on, you kind of, flow downhill in terms of where you find yourself, but, path of least resistance stuff.
Sure.
I'm not particularly motivated at this point to like brush up on my marimba chops or do a ton of orchestral playing. Those are valid and wonderful things to do, but they take practice, and my resources are dedicated elsewhere creatively. So I ended up doing rock and roll in the studio. It's great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. So how'd you get plugged into the Jam Room here in Columbia?
I mean, I did from 2010 to like 2015. Played in a variety of local bands. Some of them were like money gigs. Some of them were a buddy's getting drunk in a garage and like trying to do something weird. So for a lot of those bands recorded at the Jam Room. So I met a lot of the crew here, and then did I forget how many years ago, but did a record with Zach Thomas doing the engineering.
Okay.
And it was great. I loved all of the people involved. There were some passionate discussions regarding like, what to dedicate studio time to. And so I one or two of my ideas ended up sounding good on tape. And so then Zach called me back in. He had some other guy that wanted to do some extra stuff. I was like, oh, I know a guy who knows stuff. And so he and I worked well together, and he still does the engineering / producing for the records I do producing / lounging on.
Sure. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Cool.
Super cool. Man. Okay. So you said you played with some bands. Some of them were money gigs.
Mm-hmm.
So when you accept or decline a gig, Like what's how do you think about that whole thing? Like what are the factors for you?
So there's a few things. There's the first person I heard say it was Bert Ligon from USC, who said, "I will play anywhere, anytime for free, but it will cost you $200 for me to put my amp in the car." Which I don't know that was his going rate, but there is a similar, man. I love playing. I love making music. It's amazing. Showing up on time and learning the songs and having your gear and like that stuff. It definitely kind of, complicates that math a little bit.
Sure.
So that certainly plays into it. I find myself charging more for the logistics than for the playing,
Sure.
Yeah. That said, there's some gigs that I just don't want, or there used to be years ago, certainly
Sure.
not any time recently. Seriously, not any of the jam room stuff. I love the jam. It's good. Like I said, I come in here and do this. It's great. But like playing stuff, right? Do you want to come to Athens and play Bob Seger covers for 3 hours? And no, I don't, right? But that's not unpleasant work. If there's an auto repair looming or any number of things, it's like, yeah, happy to do it, but whatever it is that's going on in my life, it's like, I don't really want to do it, but I really want $700. So that's my price for this one. I generally find it proper to kind of price myself out of the stuff I don't want to do, as opposed to saying like, no, I don't like your music. I don't care for you personally. This is a purely professional, like that's not a road to go down. Sure. It's like, no, I love you and I love your music. Absolutely. But I just, no, this one's going to cost you. I would much rather be on my couch tonight. So,
that's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, like as musicians, like you kind of learn the skill of like pricing yourself out of certain things, because not every gig is a fulfilling experience or something that you can quickly and easily like accomplish.
Yep. So. Well, and I think like not every gig is something that you are needed for, Sure. Like if the nature of the gig is based on some kind of like, hey man, we're musicians who respect each other. There's this thing that you do that, man, I really would like on this one. Man, like what can I do to get you on board with this? Is sure. That's a talk to have. But like I say, man, there's a ton of 15-year-old drummers in town who can play Bob Seger. So, call one of them, man. You don't want me. You just need drums. I'm just the first number in your book. It's fine. Namaste. Go. God bless. But like, no, not me.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it's also, it can be like, also in like a different way, like fulfilling to know some up and coming musicians that have the chops, but don't have the connections yet.
Oh, absolutely.
And so to like have a buddy that like, maybe has good heart and like is developing themselves and being able to take them and like plug them into a gig that like, not in like some big crazy egotistical way, but like it's a bad gig for you, but maybe a really exciting opportunity for them. Like that can be a really fulfilling thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that like that is one of the things that I love about, my experience with like music as a career is being part of that larger kind of, I don't know, ecosystem or whatever, that there's not, there's drummers at Brendan. Dude can play me under the table. That is a phenomenal drummer. I don't resent him. There's gigs for him. There's gigs for me. Like I love the guy. It's like, and that same thing is true for, students of mine, from 10 years ago that are now gigging. There's no thread. It's just like, oh no, welcome. Like, this is nice. It's nice showing up to work here and like coming in and be like, oh man, this is insane that I do this for a living.
No doubt.
Yeah. Of just like hanging out with my buddies and making art. It's great.
No doubt. I love that.
Yeah.
I love
Not
that.
everyone can play every gig all the time. You know what I mean? If I could be everywhere at once, sure. But
well, and I think there's something to be said. I think there's some of that comes from that kind of, I think this sort of tradition of like, cutting contests or like even, drumline stuff where there is like a competitive aspect of like who plays better. And I think that's wonderful as a motivational tool for practice. It's good. Like it is good to keep in mind and to like accept the reality. There are people in this world that can play better than you. And I think that's good. I think it's real easy for that to kind of, metastasize into this idea of like, oh no, I'm the guy. If there's someone else in town who has a good gig, that threatens something about my interactions with music, which I think there's not a ton of that in Columbia, which I very much enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I feel like there's such a collaborative spirit in Columbia, especially like around, the studio world and like there's just certain communities kind of built around certain venues that it feels so like collaborative and so communal because everyone is supporting each other and encouraging each other and like just like cheering each other on as like everyone is getting better and like getting more connected and like succeeding in whatever they're like pursuing. Like I love that about this town. And I don't think I personally have only ever done music professionally really in Columbia, or like I guess more specifically, I've only ever plugged into the musical community of a city in Columbia, and I have heard that it is not like that everywhere else.
Yep.
Which it's really, I definitely consider it a privilege to be like a part of a city that has that spirit,
Yeah.
Which I don't really know exactly where that spirit comes from. Maybe the USC School of Music, that might be part of it. I'm not really sure, but it is a really cool thing about the city,
Yeah.
for sure.
It also just feels so small, I think, is part of it, where it feels like we're all just like shoulder to shoulder around here. Like,
yeah, no doubt. I feel like something I've kind of observed is that, it's like, first of all, the community is so small that like any big mess up you might have really affects your reputation, like among everyone, because word travels really fast in a smaller community. Yeah, I think that's definitely a big reason why like everyone is just so cool and nice to each other most of the time. Is because if you say one bad thing to one person, it's like that's gonna circulate really quickly in a small town like Columbia. I think there's also like something I've kind of noticed is like I found that like on average musicians like in the music community in Columbia are like generally like pretty kind and like friendly to each other. And I think something I've thought about is that when you have a job that's like so dependent on like getting opportunities from your friends and like from these people you meet all the time, because I mean, pretty rare that musicians in this town like ever get like one opportunity at one place with one band and just make their entire career off that one thing. When you're so dependent on like these like constant inflow of opportunities, like you kind of have to be cool and nice and friendly to everyone you meet.
right.
But because of that, it's so fun to hang out with other musicians because there's just this like natural culture of like we all want to be cool to each other so that we all like might at some point get an opportunity, but also it's just because we're cool and we like each other,
yeah.
So I think that's part of the spirit of this town as well.
Yeah, for sure.
It's definitely not just for like personal gain.
Yeah.
It's like we really do meet a lot of cool people all the time. Like I don't know, we'll play gigs. We'll meet people at gigs that we've just never met before, and it's like, wow, I didn't even know you were here. And it's like, oh, that's a really cool person. Like honestly, that's how we felt about you the first time we met you. Is like because we played for a class together, right? That's what happened. Okay, and here we are now, and it's like, yeah, you were a super cool guy, and we're very happy to know you.
Right back at you.
Absolutely, awesome, man. So what advice? So okay, obviously you've had a lot of experience playing live. You've also had a lot of experience not recently, I mean the last decade or so, playing in the studio. What advice would you give to, let's make it two questions. So what advice would you give to people that want to build a career playing live, doing the kind of work that you did? And what advice would you give to people that want to build like session work and like more of a like studio-based music career?
So and in my experience, right, because it's been my experience playing live, like I said, there are some gigs that are like sustainable, fine. There's no rehearsal involved. You meet the band when you show up. It's like, hey, how are you? I'm good, doing great. Do you know Mary Jane's Last Dance? I absolutely do. Here we go. 2, 3, 4. And then after that, it's Georgia Satellites, and then gigs. They pay you, walk out at the end of the night, money, you go home. And those are great, but you end up having to do a lot of those. So the longer I did the live stuff, the more I found myself really wanting to do stuff that just didn't pay as well, right? Just harsh noise, face paint, house show stuff, because it scratched an itch that Mary Jane's Last Dance just no longer did, So I think for the live stuff, the advice I would give is to do everything you can to be in control of your destiny a little bit, right? And I think some of that is just because I'm a drummer, so I don't book gigs. I don't do, the guitar player, the lead singer, ends up booking the thing, and then I get a call, and then I go play the gig, which is great. But you're gonna play the songs that those people want to play, and that's the deal. And you need to do it well if you want to make a career out of it.
Yeah.
If you can kind of control some of those, more creative or artistic decisions that go into those kind of more, profitable gigs, you got to be the person doing, again, the logistics, right? You're the one who needs to pick out the rest of the band. You're the one who needs to pick out the songs. You're the one who needs to schedule the rehearsals and call the bars and like that stuff. And I think for me, probably that's the big reason why I was like, oh, no, I'm done with this. But that's I guess a thing to keep in mind. My advice would be keep in mind that the art and the logistics just stay intertwined. Mm-hmm. If you're driving 2 hours a night, be advised that the charm wears off of that real quick.
No doubt.
Because you're not making lawyer money.
Mm-hmm.
You're making, if you hustle hard, you're making first year public school teacher money. And that's mm-hmm. not good. That's not at all a slam on teachers. They're grossly underpaid, mm-hmm. but it's, those are subsistence living things. So if there's no artistic reward in it, that's a rough way to go.
No doubt.
Yeah.
There's that other tier, where you're like touring with national acts and like doing the thing, you're a member of a union and that stuff. But if you're moving in those circles, you don't need my advice. You know what you're doing.
Yeah. Fair enough.
For the studio stuff, I think, I don't know if this is career. No, I don't have any career advice for studio stuff. I got lucky. The jam room is paradise. I love it here. My colleagues are gracious and will call to remind me about stuff that maybe I didn't handle real well, about like, hey man, you got 10 a.m. tomorrow. It's like, yes, I do now. Cause I forgot to make a note. So it's great. Like I love it here specifically as far as that relating to career stuff. I don't know, have a consistent wage, know what your rates are, sure. Going in, you hate to, run your studio time like you would run a business in terms of keeping your receipts. Again, sure. I mm-hmm. do real well here because everyone understands that my brain don't work good and will call me to remind me. So it's great. If I were anywhere else in the world, I may well be out of the job.
Sure.
But that's not a statement about creativity or musical anything. But yeah, that would be kind of the big one. Again, career wise is like, save your receipts. But nothing as far as the creativity that goes into it. There's not. I spend so much more time, and I love it. It is a craft. It is a good craft. Jonathan Moffat, Michael Jackson's old drummer, made a career out of it. Put 2 and 4 in the right place. That's it. Mm-hmm. You may be called upon to play a samba in 13/8. Probably not. That'll probably be 1 out of 100 of the calls you get. Being able to play the music of the day just consistently and well is, I think, a much more valuable job skill than really being able to pull off Harry Parch Sun Ra weirdness. That's sure. That is. Eternal music to make a career out of it. I don't know how they did it.
Sure. That's a great point. Oh man, that's such a great truth for like specifically for drummers, and I would include like bassists. And this is going to be hilarious coming from me. Shout out anybody that's played a gig with me on bass that is going to laugh at what I'm about to say. But like knowing how to like knowing how to focus on like keeping the groove right, yep. and keeping like hitting your mark, I guess, is like can be such a better ability than like having all these crazy chops and being able to play 13/8,
yep.
all that stuff. That's such, no doubt.
Man, so you asked about how I got into music, right? But I think one of the things that has like maintained that interaction or the reward or whatever is, there is something that appeals to me very much about these bigger ideas, right? Emotional power, right? And music, like with theory doing what it do, is it's descriptive. It's not prescriptive.
Sure.
So it's like, oh yeah, no, that emotional power, like here's the deal. Like, do you want that tonic chord to pay off? Well, yeah, you play a 5/7. You want a little more? 5/7 flat 9. You want a little more? Flat 9 sharp 5. Like, I don't know. Sure. You can. Yeah. There's this thing that you can do to engage with the abstract, right?
Yeah.
And I think like when you're playing like Western popular music, you know, again, this isn't Harry Part stuff, but you know, stuff with a groove. There's a groove. You get that system of like tension and release, right? As opposed to the big, you know, dominant chord going back to the tonic. It's like, oh, no, you can't do that on drums.
Yeah.
But you can introduce this much tension and maintain it. And that much, you are 80 milliseconds late on 2 and 4 the entire song. And there's something, you create this new space. There's this new thing there, right? Yeah. And so I think for a lot of that, you know, chopsier stuff or whatever, it's the only time you veer into the territory of too many notes is when you're playing stuff that threatens that.
Yeah.
Play as many notes as you want to. Play 64th notes to death if you can maintain that weird, abstract, whatever it is, that you can move the timing on 2 and 4 and see the crowd go from moving their hips to moving their shoulders. And it's just like, that's unreal, that much.
Yeah, no doubt.
And if you got some hot shit Hurtafil you want to throw in, that's great. But if it messes with, like, the spell's broken.
Yeah,
you know?
No doubt. Man, that's so well said.
Well, I think that's true. I think that's true for so much music stuff, man. I think, my 2 cents, the stuff that matters, right? Easy. You want to break somebody's heart? Fine. You gotta be in your heartbreak the whole time. That's it. You want to make somebody sad? Be sad when you sing. The deal is, if you have to think about the notes at all, the technique, the breath, the timing, the tempo, the touch, the note, the stuff, the logistics of the thing, the spell's broken.
Yeah.
So you got to practice that stuff until you are executing your craft and your focus is on the stuff that matters.
Yeah.
Which I think is for me remains a pretty helpful motivational tool. It's like, man, I'm playing this right. It's like, cool. Can you think about whatever joy or aggression or whatever that thing is, the place where you're going to use this? Can you be there and still play it? It's like, oh, nope, notes went bad. It's like, well, practice it some more then.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
No doubt.
I would talk to students about that a lot, where like you can learn all of the vocal technique in the world all the time, but like you're not going to do that on stage.
Yep.
You're not, like, you might in a moment, or if you lose it, be like, oh, let me recenter, like let me come back to the technique and then I can get back into the emotion. Mm-hmm. But you're going to be driven by emotion on stage. You're going to be driven by, I don't know, whatever the song makes you want to do. Yep. So, yeah.
Well, and I think that the saying specifically on stage, I think is true. And that for me, for a lot of like production stuff is something I think is generally true, right? Is a lot of musicians will approach their recording with the idea of like, oh, we want to do our live set. Awesome. But do you mean you want to do your set, or do you mean you want to play the notes from your set? Because when you're playing in that bar, the emotion, the adrenaline, like there is no way you can, I don't know, include some kind of little chemical enhancement, I guess, so that the listener is always in that exact, it is Friday night and I'm off and the bar's full and the whatever, the live, we want it to be our live set. It's like, yeah, but that's the stuff, right? Is the glasses clinking and the whole, you can't do that in the studio, right? But there's other stuff you can do. That's you got all these tools. Mm-hmm. Right? Is like, yeah, that's a great guitar line, but if you want it to feel like your live set, you need to play that 14 times in a row. And then, right? Like, or whatever the case may be, but I think that's a unique power in the studio, is being able to really kind of carefully construct vibe stuff. Again, using, kind of those specific tools to kind of approach, something that becomes pretty hard to describe.
Yeah. I think that's one of my favorite things about like studio versus live, is just like, you can hear someone's studio version of something a million times over, and when you witness it live, it's a completely different thing. So I guess what you're describing to me is you have to approach it differently when you're in the studio setting. Yeah.
I mean, because I think otherwise what you end up... And again, this is my 2 cents. There are a million ways to approach music. This is a way of looking at it that has worked real well for me, right? Is So there are these really powerful tools that we have, right? Whatever, rhythm, timbre, tone, the stuff you learn, right? The stuff that you get better at when you practice, right? But those are tools, right? And I think it is, a lot of really good musicians, they get really good at using those tools. And it's like, man, that is, and the comparison I always use for my students is I say, okay, so, imagine, I'm saying like, man, check this out. I got this chainsaw. Just look at this amazing chainsaw. Cool. You're going to cut down trees with that? Like, well, no, I don't have any trees on my property, but look at this guy. And it's like, yeah, that's great. Are you going to make art with it? You're going to carve a little bear and sell it in Gatlinburg? No. I don't care what I do with it, but look at this guy. And that's great. That is an amazing tool, man. Congratulations. I've never seen a $3,000 chainsaw before. Spectacular. I find myself enjoying the interactions much more with somebody that says, I want to build a spaceship in my backyard. Fantastic. What are you going to be using? It's like, man, I have tissue paper, and I have rocks, and I have epoxy. It's like, man, I want to see what you do, dude. And it's like, and I think ideally you get these really powerful tools and you use them with a specific artistic intent. I think it's really easy when you spend all that time reading the manuals, right, to forget. You become obsessed with using the thing the right way, and it becomes difficult to make something new.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's true in a variety of contexts, whether it's, studio technology or the near infinite amount of time and, resources you can dump into any number of things. For me, the point of music, when you're using music to its fullest power, the listener is maybe not noticing the little technical things that you're doing, that you're using these two tools to contribute to this thing. Mm-hmm. Right. I had a professor once, my guy, who there was a guest musician who was coming in and did a little concert in the clinic. And he played this piece. It's Mexican Dance No. 1 by Gordon Stout. And it's the mallet No. 1 has to reach down and keep hitting C. It's big pedal C, and you make all these jumps, and you got to reach down. That's the hard part of it, is always hitting that C when you go down. And so, did the thing. We have the, percussion kind of masterclass thing the next week. So, what'd you guys think of the piece? And someone pointed out, I was like, he missed that C 5 times. And my professor flipped out. It's like, is that what you were listening for? That was it? You were counting missed notes? You're doing this for a career? And you were sitting there listening to music and you were counting missed notes? You did it wrong, man. No, you get a 0 for your recital attendance grade. No, which at the time seemed like a real, harsh thing. But and this was not a guy who didn't practice. This was, doctorate from Eastman, whip cracking, practice to death guy. And he was like, man, the reason why you do that is so whatever. So even, the jackasses who are counting missed notes, even they get that little kind of brush with the divine, Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's, like I said, worth keeping in mind in a variety of contexts, that there's this other thing that is real difficult to describe, and I think makes it scary to interact with for a lot of musicians, of like, what are you using your tools for?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, I can do it like this too. It's like, I know you can. Which one is grimier? Well, this one's triplets, and those are 16th notes. It's like, right, how will you deploy them? What is the rubric you're using to choose which of those licks works? And so
We're back from our break for sponsors. Hopefully, by the time this airs, we have sponsors.
We're just gonna
shout out whoever wants to sponsor us for this.
Yeah.
Zach, you gotta. Also, real quick, shout out Zach Bingham, our producer. Shout out the Jam
shout
Room.
out Zach.
He's our real sponsor. We appreciate you,
true.
Zach. We're gonna get him a mic at some point.
And a camera angle.
Yeah. Okay, so this is somewhat. I guess. This sounds bad. This is somewhat selfishly motivated. What advice would you give someone that's going from like a hired gun live musician role to someone that's like entering into the more like creative space, into more recording, writing, like that kind of world? What advice could you give them?
So there again, I think keeping in mind that much of that, really kind of creative part of it has to do with just kind of nuts and bolts stuff. So I think if you're wanting to give people notes, it speeds up the process, right? It's not morally more virtuous. It doesn't represent the fact that you've put in the hard work, but it just speeds it up. If you can say, man, I would rather you hung out on the Dorian scale, right? As opposed to whatever thing, or to say like, yeah, I would rather you thumped as opposed to picked. Use a pick on this one instead of your fingers. Just knowing enough to give the people that you're working with to kind of point them in the right direction. A lot of that, in my experience, comes with like knowing what direction you want to go in, and that's a thing I find myself doing kind of a good bit is in doing production stuff. It's just kind of translating is like, someone saying like, man, I just, this one is, let's see, it's just this one's just bluesy, which is great. Awesome. Good note. The session players in the room may be able to do 400 different kinds of bluesy, and being able to do a little bit of translating, like, oh yeah, no, it's a little bit more of a jump blues. If you can just kind of hang out on the quarter note, and I think the more of that you can do, the more you can point your players in the right direction. But again, what that comes down to is then sitting down and doing a little bit of practice on instruments that you wouldn't otherwise play.
Sure.
Or watching videos or whatever the case may be, but just kind of familiarizing yourself with the vocabulary you need is, I think, a pretty helpful thing for sure.
Makes a lot of sense, man. So what? Obviously, you have found yourself as a great session player, or at least a very hireable session player, if nothing else. What in your mind separates?
I had a jazz band director once refer to my playing as, quote, breathtakingly competent.
Wow.
And that stuck with me for 25 years.
That's my goal. I'm trying to be like that. Honestly, I'm trying to get there. So what in your head separates like a good session musician from maybe somebody that might not get called again session musician? We don't use the word bad here.
Sure.
No bad.
Well, I mean, first and foremost is people skills. I don't know, if you're pitching a fit, damaging equipment, like, no, of course not. Or right. There are several stages of kind of not getting called again. As far as kind of the finding yourself further down on the list types, stuff regarding musical attributes as opposed to, wanton debauchery. Consistency and flexibility, I would say, are kind of the two big things. Is again, you're probably not going to want to do those, you're not going to be called upon to do the more complicated polyrhythmic stuff that often. Being able to play to a click, though, is you'll do that every time. So but also a little bit of flexibility. Like I say, usually, clients or producers, either one, aren't going to give you notes like, man, that needs to be a little bit less Flim by Aphex Twin and a little bit more, middle period Herbie Hancock. No one's going to give you that note, but to say like, man, it just needs, is there a way to just put a little bit more pep in that? And part of what the job is being able to translate that into like, oh, okay, it's this one then where the, the hi-hat moves this other beat, or whatever those specifics are. But yeah, just being flexible with your part. You're never going to get a note that says, oh man, I love it. That's great. That sounds, that's it. That is disco, solid, absolutely rock and roll. But can you make it just a little bit more like some of those Alice Coltrane records? Like that's not, no one's steering that hard that direction. You'll get notes about more solid, a little bit more flashy, and being able to make small tweaks to, while keeping much of it the same is a pretty valuable skill.
And I bet you get so much of that specifically as like the session drummer for songs, because the longer you play music in a band, the more you're like the drums are just the absolute heartbeat of every song, every band, every live sound. Like, yeah, no doubt. I'm curious though, and maybe I don't know, maybe you shouldn't say this because this might be from a jam room producer.
Yes.
But I would love to hear like the most out there note you've gotten from a producer.
Man, no, this was from before my jam room days. I had I was doing this big like gospel thing, festival choir kind of whatever. And the music director asked that my playing be, quote, more like an arrow and less like a dart.
What could that possibly mean?
So for him, what it meant is I had to drop. I was playing with the tip of the stick on the top of the hi-hat, as was the custom at the time. And he wanted a little bit more shoulder, just on those quarter notes, just a little bit more grit in that high end. Yeah.
Wow. You said more like an arrow, less like a dart?
He wanted a little bit more. He still wanted it sharp, but just a little bit more beef towards the tail of the sharp part.
How did you interpret that? Like, how did you discover what he meant by
this
that?
guy's an idiot is what I interpreted it as. What I said
That's so
in
funny.
the moment, and this has been 20 some years ago, but in the moment it was like, well, like this, like this, like this, okay, but it's eye doctor stuff. Better here, okay, better here,
Sure.
okay, better here. And, as few of those as it takes to be like, okay, this is what he wants.
Yeah.
Once the fills to be straight 16th notes and not syncopated triplet stuff. But again, I think that is, the far end of like, man, there's a better way to put that, dude.
Yeah,
a little bit more
So
rock and roll gives you more details and accomplishes the same thing. I think he was kind of feeling his oats as an artistic type.
That's so funny. So when you get hired to play drums on a session, do you find yourself more like receiving notes and interpreting the vision of the producer or of the artist? What is that dynamic like?
So when I'm doing it professionally, right? But that's a pretty blurry line. The stuff like you said, it's an artistic community that is also professionally engaged with the art. So those lines are a little bit blurred, but if I'm doing it professionally, it's not my gig. I can say, man, I have been doing this, practicing this craft for these 30 years. And I can give you my honest to God, straight, sincere answer that what you are looking for, the sound you hear in your head, I know it. I know it to be true. It's this beat. It's this one right here. I know that. If you want that one, I'll play it. That's fine. You are the guy making the decisions, and that's fine. That doesn't mean anything to me. That's the client's artistic vision, and so that's the beat that is gonna get played. If I'm a producer, that a conversation that ends at that same point might take a little bit longer. Like, hey man, let's talk. You said you wanted this to be a dance record and blah, blah, blah. And this, starts to sway a little bit more towards yada, yada. Do you want a song on the record that is different in that, but again, ultimately it's your call. If I'm making art with somebody, right? Playing in a band, doing something that I'm in some way creatively invested in, I find myself wanting to talk a little bit more about like, okay, so what is this that we are doing? Because we are doing it together. Do you want it grimy? Do you want it clean? Do you want it pretty? Do you want them to dance? Do you want them to wish they were dancing? where are we moving with this? What can I contribute to this process that, does something to be a little, to communicate maybe a slightly more important truth than here is one more power trio record. And that's great if you want to do a power trio record, but there are so many of theirs. Why would I listen to yours instead of a Mudhoney record? Because Mudhoney kicks ass. So if you want to do that, do it differently than them at least. Or anyway, all of that to say, if it's a collaborative situation, I find myself talking a little bit more like this, as opposed to being like, all right, here's your beat. Clock's ticking, man. It's your time. Let's play this thing. As opposed to, let's spend, man, I used to play in this band. It was one of the best bands I ever played in. The musicians involved, brilliant. I mean, absolute, like next level, brilliant players. Brilliant musical minds, competent players. But good. The process was amazing. We practiced every single week. We practiced every Monday for 3 hours. We did that for 18 months and we never played a single gig. We never finished rehearsing a single song. I remember 3 months spent on, okay, is this second chord in the song, is that an E flat major 7 or an E flat major 9?
Oh man.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. But it was like, it like opened this door of like, oh, it matters. It doesn't matter enough to spend 18 months on it, in my opinion. And that would be, if this were my baby, that'd be the way I'd go, is like, let's put this thing to bed. I don't care. They're the same chord, but it matters.
They're pretty
Like,
interchangeable.
it's that, and to that environment was a really good one, because it kind of was the first time I ever realized of like, oh no, all this stuff, like, the difference between an E flat major 7 and E flat major 9, you learned that difference to make this decision. If you default on the decision, there was no point in learning it. Like, which one do you want to play? And if you don't have an opinion, you don't know the song well enough. And so, I mean, it was, not super productive. But I think in terms of like a musical experience, that for me was definitely, worthwhile.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, we always close the Jam Room podcasts out with this question.
With one question?
Well, it's like one 3-part question.
Is there, all right. Is there a buzzer type device I will need to use?
I don't think so.
Okay.
First question. Are you coffee guy? You be coffee guy?
Do you
drink coffee often?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm a Diet Coke guy. Like, that's
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
We like to ask for favorites, like local favorites.
Mm-hmm.
So coffee is one of them. That's something we're very passionate about. So
Diet Coke,
goes.
all-time best beverage. I don't. Your people are not my
Let's
people.
keep
Your
going.
gods are not my god. I don't know.
Well, let's go for then, like your spots to eat. You know what I mean? Like if you have, let's say you have a friend from out of town and you got to take them somewhere to go have a meal. Where are you taking them?
So depends on the meal. Enzo's in 5 Points is best sandwiches in town.
When do you get there? What's your order?
I go for the Sosa.
So okay.
Yep.
Okay.
That's a good order.
But it reminds me of the Cuban sandwiches of my youth. So yes, Enzo's real good. Man, Max on Laurel. Have y'all ever been there?
I don't think so.
It is a nondescript brick building, but they have the best chili burger in town. It used to be Max Cash Grocery, but then they started taking cards. There is purple Kool-Aid is a drink option. Like it's Max
Nice.
rules.
All right.
Dang.
Black Rooster pretty good.
Black Rooster?
Okay.
Yeah, enjoy it. They got a rooftop bar. The cocktails are nice.
I went to bed.
Yeah.
We gotta go there.
Yeah, we haven't.
Yeah, tartar's real good.
Okay. What about like beer or cocktail, or wine or whatever vice you take?
Well, I mean, as far as my vice,
whatever alcoholic vice.
Okay.
Public space.
I find myself enjoying one of two things. One is just absolute bottom of the barrel brown liquor, just to 2 fingers in the bottom of a glass. No, 1 finger in the bottom of a glass.
Sure.
2 with ice. To just kind of sip on and just sort of stare at things. To contemplate, to sort of that guy. Yep. It's so either that one or like something in a coconut shell.
Okay.
Perfect.
I don't like an umbrella, some kind of like fizzy, whatever, a lavender club soda on top.
Sure.
Those are great. Yeah, pool drinks.
And where might you go in town to get some of those?
Ooh,
If you're out with
so
friends, just want to hang out.
I would like to stay in a public forum. By the way, R.I.P. the Wig. That was always
We mention that at least once a podcast. Usually.
Every time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Still the best hamburger I've ever had in my life. Shouts out. We mourn your passing. So, New Brooklyn's always good, just because of
It's gonna get better
it's. Oh yeah,
because they're moving to 5 Points.
are they?
It's announced.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
public information.
It is public
They're moving to
information.
Cottonwood.
I wish them the best and hope that works well. I was just going to say I part of the reason I still love New Brooklyn is it does what I want a like bar or venue to do at this point in my life. New Brooklyn does
Sure.
that thing.
Yeah.
I don't care to go see a $500,000 laser light display. Like that's great, but that's not. I don't want that at my bar.
Sure.
And like I think just having gone there for this past decade and a half, it's probably like that's
Yeah.
when I want to drink, I want a New Brooklyn drink.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I wish them the best in 5 Points.
Man, Evan, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It's
You're a
been a
wonderful
pleasure.
person, great musician. Check Evan out, or just listen to a record that he played on. Which there are
I
many of
don't
those.
have social media.
Yeah.
Remember my whole thing about logistics.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's records.
There's records. Thanks to the Jam Room for having us. Great place to get some studio recording done if you need some of that. Thanks to Zach Bingham for producing the podcast. We're Sam and Illia. You can check us out at Sam and Illia.
ILLIA.
There's 2 L's. What's the Instagram Jam Room handle? Is it at Jam Room Studio? Just look up Jam Room Studios. It's definitely it's gonna pop up. I think that's about it. Yeah, y'all have a good one. Thanks for listening.
Bye.